Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome. Dennis McLean is my name, from UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction Communications Department. You're all very welcome. We're very tight to time here, so we have to finish by 2 o'clock. So I'll just start by introducing the panelists. From my left, we have Kamal Kishore, representing the National Disaster Management Authority of India. We have Mami Mitsutori, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction. We have Mr. Manuel Seger, Secretary of State at the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, Switzerland. And we have one of the leading authors of the GAR, the publication, one of the publications that was just launched this morning, Professor Aramor Ravi. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Ms. Mitsutori to open the proceedings, and I would ask each of the panelists to keep their remarks short so we have time for questions. Thank you.
So I will keep mine very short because I'm sure that everybody else has many interesting things to say. In a nutshell, this global platform is a place where we are going to raise ambition towards the implementation of the Sendai framework with the stakeholders. And the last part with the stakeholders is very important because, as you know, Sendai framework is a document, an agreement that needs to be implemented by whole of the society. This means, of course, primarily governments, but local governments, private sector, civil society, individuals. Everybody is involved in this venture, and we all have to work together. The theme of this year is inclusivity. We have heard a lot, even already through those 2 preparatory days, about inclusivity, how it is important to include the most vulnerable into everything we do in terms of disaster risk reduction, and finally, changing them into the ones who make the difference. That is what inclusivity is. We are also going to talk about resilience. Resilience dividend, what does that mean? Resilience dividend means that resilience is that disasters are terrible, but disaster risk reduction is an opportunity. And when we build resilience through our efforts to reduce risks, then we are creating resilience, which at the end of the day has a dividend for everybody, for the society, for the individuals, as I mentioned. So that's where we're trying to get. And ultimately, the other word in the theme of the global platform is sustainability, because everything we are doing right now, the Sendai Framework achievement, Paris Agreement, we are all working towards a sustainable development future. And when we talk about sustainable development future, we're not only talking about the developing countries, we're talking about the whole planet. We know that the whole planet is in danger, as we've heard of from the report that was recently released, telling us that we are in the danger of losing 1 million species. So this is what this global platform is for. We're so happy to come back to Geneva. We'd like to thank our host, the Swiss government, once again. And I'll stop here and would like to pass to my co-chair of today, State Secretary, Mr. Zager.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. Switzerland is very proud to be able to host this platform, this global platform on DRR. It is the most important meeting within the Sendai framework. Our goals are to put DRR, disaster risk reduction, and the devastating effects of climate change even more firmly on the global agenda. And we would like to help find effective solutions to all these global challenges, such as population growth, urbanization, climate change, and migration. They all contribute to rising risks of natural disasters. Such events occur both in rich and in poor countries, but they affect poor countries disproportionately. Poor communities often live on marginal land in high-risk areas. They lack the resources to mitigate the adverse effects of natural hazards and to recover from disasters through insurance or through savings. Investments in DRR give tremendous value for money. Current studies estimate that each dollar invested in risk prevention on average avoids losses of at least $4. Climate change is a reality. Glaciers are melting and coral reefs are dying at a rapid pace. In Switzerland, we have been witnessing the retreat of glaciers for over 50 years. It is actually one of the first and most robust indicators in this country. A quarter of all glaciers in Switzerland has already been lost. Globally, the consequences of climate change are increasing heat waves, dry spells, and major floods. In Central Asia, for example, irrigation of agricultural lands is fed by glacier runoff and melting snow. With glaciers receding, the availability of water is under severe threat, and food production for millions of people are at risk. We are pleased to host this global platform here in Geneva, the international hub for disaster risk reduction, a place to discuss the emerging issues that will dominate the global agenda in the coming years, and home to many international organizations striving to reduce risk and strengthen resilience. It is with great satisfaction that we have been observing growing determination at the global level to work towards these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary of State Seger. I'd now like to pass the floor to Colin Bishop.
Thank you. Thank you to UNDRR, our hosts, and the Swiss government for this opportunity to say a few words at this press briefing. I would like to talk a little bit about what is possible, possibilities, and the challenges that lie before us. Today is 15th, almost 2 weeks ago. There was a big cyclone, severe cyclone with wind speeds exceeding 180 kilometers per hour, 210 kilometers per hour. And it hit the eastern coast of India, the state of Odisha. And over a period of 24 hours, we evacuated systematically 1.2 million people. That's more than the population of 25 countries in the world. And we reduced mortality from a similar cyclone a couple of decades ago by something like 96%. So it's very much within our reach to achieve target 1 within the Sendai framework time frame. If we can do it for cyclone, we've done it similarly for heat waves, we should be able to do for other hazards as well. And this cannot be done, SRSG highlighted the theme of inclusivity. This cannot be done by just the government alone or just the scientific and technical institutions alone. The last person who's going to be hit by the cyclone has to be driving this process, not just a silent spectator in the process. So we have shown that it works. We can take some satisfaction from it, but we can't be complacent about it. We have to consolidate this progress, but there are other frontiers. While we achieved remarkable reduction in mortality, the losses to infrastructure, the power systems, the telecom, roads and bridges, aviation was tremendous. And some of these systems we have rebuilt twice over. So we have to ask this question, is it really a sustainable situation? So we really have to move beyond just focusing on saving lives to protecting livelihoods through having more robust infrastructure systems. And again, referring to the other session, SRSG was talking about a systems approach to risk reduction. We cannot look at all of this in silos. So that's the next frontier, to make sure that whatever development investment we are making, we are taking an integrated view of it, and we are locking in resilience into our infrastructure systems, whether it is big physical infrastructure or it is social infrastructure infrastructure or ecosystem infrastructure. We have to really build all of that into it and have an integrated view to it. So, and that's the theme of this global platform as well. Next 2.5 days, we'll have opportunities to unpack some of these issues and chart a concrete agenda forward and infuse a sense of urgency towards achieving the Sendai targets. Thank you.
Main authors with us here. Sorry, is Mike, are you hearing me? So over to Professor Ravi for a few words on the Global Assessment Report, which was launched earlier today.
I've spoken enough, so I won't speak very much, but all that I'd like to say is that over the last decade since we've been working on this, both the science and the policy processes have converged. To speak to what Kamal was saying earlier, I actually led the assessment of that cyclone where over 10,000 people died 20 years ago. And we set up the systems that actually have enabled what India's done just now, reducing mortality by about 96%, setting up the infrastructure, etc. So progress can be made even in the most difficult circumstances. The question is how to bring together all the key stakeholders so that we deliver an integrated solution for people on the ground. And that is really hard, because it has to work from the global to the local. And we have to build the institutional capacity to reduce vulnerability, like I said, because that's the critical frontier for us. And to do that, we have to transform all our systems simultaneously. You have to transform economic systems, you have to change the social structure, and we have to deal with questions of infrastructure and economic development. And that is the interesting challenge that we're trying to understand better and better. And the science is helping us. Some of the best scientists in the world are working on this process, along with policymakers.
Well, thank you to our panel for being so succinct in their comments. And now we open the floor for questions. Yes. If you stand up, perhaps your voice will carry. Do we have a mic, Jeanette? Jeanette, do we have a mic?
I tried like that.
So, Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency, a question for Manuel Zager. So you touched on the retreat of the glacier, and you mentioned the huge investment that Switzerland made in the past. Last week, the president of the Swiss Red Cross told me that countries like Switzerland in the 2 last decades shared a lot of funding with other countries and a lot of expertise, but tended to forget to look after their own infrastructure and preparedness and processes because they weren't faced with major disasters. So how do you assess the current level of preparedness of rich countries, in particular Switzerland? And do you share that diagnostic that more could be made as well in the rich countries that weren't faced with such disasters?
I assume I answered the question right away? Okay. Well, first of all, to the extent that countries like Switzerland are part of the problem in the footprint that we have in water consumption, in CO2 emissions, we also have to be part of the solution worldwide, and we are. First of all, in this country, as you know, we deal with glacier recession in ways such as covering glaciers and protecting glaciers from sunlight. Then, of course, also I live in Bern, and also the city of Bern, since the major flood in 2005, has made great strides in protecting some of the areas that are close to the main river that runs through the city much better. And since then, we haven't really had any major floods. Think of the avalanche protection measures that we have in the mountains. So Switzerland is very well prepared. Of course, there's always more that can be done. And actually, I'm happy to say that we have Mr. Wies with us, who is in charge of all this from the canton of Bern. I don't know if you would like to add something. A microphone will be provided to you.
Well, it's a very interesting conclusion that you mentioned before, and the answer would be pretty complex and long, and I try to kind of answer your question or this conclusion in 2 or 3 sentences. I mean, related to glacier retreat, I guess Switzerland was always on an extremely high level of monitoring the glacier retreat. So in the 90s, in the 0 years, Switzerland was well prepared to realize that based on glacier retreat, natural hazard events could occur. And so measures were taken, preparation measures were taken, and you know about the first severe events that occurred in Switzerland related to glacier lake outbursts. We could handle those events pretty well. We were able, thanks to the strategy related to risk management, that those villages affected by such kind of events didn't have to face severe losses or severe damage.
Thank you. Yes. In the front, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Latif Idris, report for Joy News in Ghana. I've read a portion of the press release, and part of it says that there is a growing potential for one disaster to produce or exacerbate another, as happens often in the case of heavy rains, which triggers landslide and mudslides. If we've identified these threats and know how important the Sendai framework is, what is preventing UNDRR from making it binding on countries so that you are not left on your own to choose and pick whether to implement the framework or not? Why can't we make it binding on countries so that there are penalties, there are punitive actions if you fail not to implement this to protect your citizens? Thank you.
It is the role of UNDRR to support the countries. I don't think it's the role of the UNDRR to honestly punish or name or shame the countries. I think probably that role is left to the citizens of that country. It is the citizens of that country, the voters of that country who are responsible and who have the right, also they're responsible to elect a government that will prioritize disaster risk reduction in the face of the current world we live. And that is why we say that the Sendai framework, the implementation is a whole of society responsibility. That is actually what it means. And of course, when governments prioritize this, we will support the governments and we advocate so that it will be prioritized.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, my name is Matthews Malata from Malawi. I'm interested in the GA report. Basically, you have highlighted that there is a threat in as far as the implementation of SDGs is concerned if we don't do something about it, especially regarding some of the targets. what's your take now as an institution to make sure that we sustain the gains that countries have made so far, but also making sure that nations or countries have got resources to make sure they're able to implement some of the resilience building measures, especially poor countries in the south. I come from Malawi, there's Mozambique and other countries. You cannot compare that with Japan, for example. There are differences. How do you intend to come in to make sure that we sustain these gains? Thank you very much.
I think that's one for you, Aroma.
Let me just, So the thing is that none of these processes is binding. This is a voluntary process. I think that's the sort of fundamental thing that we have to deal with. The challenge, at least I can speak sort of individually here rather than on behalf of any agency, the challenge is that national governments have to be able to prioritize processes within their own frameworks. On top of that, of course, you have international assistance, and you have new initiatives just now to be able to harden infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't only mean roads and bridges, it also means social infrastructure. Because one of the most effective ways of dealing with these questions in countries that have relatively low income and high vulnerability is really by making people aware of what's happening.